to get some. I just need to like, wrap my head around what I'm doing wrong because I know I'm making very obvious mistakes, but
Mm.
it's my first time playing DPS,
Mm-hmm.
so I just need to, get it seen by someone else
All
who has
right.
another opinion.
Sounds good with me. So then, well, yep, I just started the recording there, and then I'll just be a minute or so while I'm looking for something to talk about.
Hmm.
All right, yep, so good initial damage.
Going free. Group up with me. Join me. Healing stream engaged. Get at me. The battle continues.
Uh-oh. So there we
Yeah,
just
that's
lost control of our movement. All right.
Damage amplified. I like this.
Okay, not much happening.
Beam activated.
Yeah. Really the only thing I would say I'm noticing at the moment is that we're just playing a little bit passively with our play style here, where we're not really doing a whole lot. We're just kind of sitting around and spamming them out, which isn't necessarily always going to be bad on Echo, but it usually is going to help if we're like on a full spam comp, that's going to be the play style we want to go for. When we are not, which that would be the case with our current composition, we are not on a full spam composition. We're actually more so on a dive because we have Echo, Tracer, Monkey, right? Then in this case, you might want to be a little bit more aggressive, especially trying to get over to like their, Ana, their Mercy, their Ashe, right, on those guys. But we spent just a lot of time shooting at tanks so far, so that's one thing I'm just noticing right off the bat. All right, so now we're starting to get a little bit more aggressive.
Mobility increased. I like this. Focus my target.
Nice beam usage.
Taking off.
Yep, ability usage is looking pretty solid so far. Right, and then, there's just a slight hesitation to go in. Yeah, no big mistakes have been made so far. The big thing is just that we're not, like, we don't seem to be participating a ton, especially when we have a Mercy pocket on top of us. There's kind of that pressure to to do things, because when we don't do things, then that means that we're essentially wasting the time of two different characters, us and Mercy. So we just want to make sure we're actively going in. Whereas a lot of times here we've just not been going in. Now of course this is getting like really far into the spawn, so we can just keep it, back up a little bit there. Come into this next fight, let's just see we copy.
Boosting up. Group up.
I don't think I even use it. That's one of those things I struggle with when to copy
Okay,
defensively.
okay. So then like you said you don't feel like you use it often enough.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't.
Okay, well in that case, we might actually we might get into like more in depth, but just generally, you use your ultimates, and this applies for most ultimates unless you're talking about defensive ults. You basically just use any ultimate in any fight that has not been won or lost. So you just use it at once the fight begins, until the fight is you've won it or you lost it. You just anytime during that spot you use it. You don't want to hold on to it, because if you hold on to it, then that just means that you're never going to actually get value out of it. And then meanwhile they're all using their ults and they're getting value out of it. So if we never use copy, we never get value out of a really powerful ultimate, and then therefore we could, in that time that we hold on to it, maybe get multiple ultimates in that time and have been doing a lot more. So let's just we'll see how we don't use it and adjust from there. Yeah, so now the fight's developing, and then they use ults first and they lose. So the other thing to keep in mind is that typically we want to use our ult first, right? We don't want to use our ult second. Ults that are used first generally get more value than ults that are used second. So that basically, as and as an example, we can say, like, let's say the enemy team had an Echo and you both have your ultimates, and she uses her ult first. if she ults, then she's going to be getting a bunch of value, getting kills, getting, damage in, and then therefore that's going to put them at an advantage. And if we use our ultimate second, we're not going to have as much team support. We're not going to, the kills that we get isn't going to do as much because we're already down people. So therefore, ults that are just used first generally get more value than ults that are used second. And then on top of all that we just said, when we don't use our ults first, sometimes that can just result in us losing the fight before we get a chance to use our ultimate, which would be this case where we just never got a chance to use it because we held on to it for so long. That now would be a waste to use it at this point, right? So we just want to make sure we're using it fast, using it first. We don't want to use it so early that the fight hasn't begun yet, but we do want to use it right as the fight's begun. As for who we should be copying, we have a couple different options here. I would probably say that their Monkey would probably be like the number one pick here. Followed up maybe by like an Ashe would probably be decent, and then Genji and Diva would probably be both a good like kind of third-ish pick. But they have a bunch of decent targets, and we don't really need to be insanely picky when they do have that many good targets to go for. All right. So yeah, they just used a bunch of ults. We didn't use ours, so that was our impact on losing that fight. Now we're coming out here. Hopefully, again, we should be looking to use our ultimates soonish. Okay, so there we got like super aggressive, and then we're using our ult to kind of bail ourselves out, which is acceptable, though we want to probably make sure that we're copying a better target than Neva. So this is where you get into kind of target priority with your ultimate. So as we just discussed, when you're ulting, there's some characters that are better to copy than other characters, and you kind of want to come up with that list in your head the first time that you see their team composition, right? Because that way you don't need to think about it, that way you don't have to think about it like as soon as you're ulting. Because if we're kind of panic picking, then we're not going to get the best character. Whereas if we're thinking about it before the fight begins or the round begins, then that means that we have a lot less panic that kind of comes in, and we can already have a list. So why you have the list is so that, for example, let's say the first person is dead or they're out of your line of sight, then we go to number 2, and then number 3, if number 2 isn't for the same reason, right? So we just kind of come up with that list, and then as we discussed in that situation, this would probably be like Monkey, then Ashe, then the Diva or the Genji. Do you feel like you're comfortable with knowing like what characters are best, like kind of good picks on Echo, or are you not so confident in that?
So the way I had it in my head is I want to pick characters that have like survivability in a fight. There's no point picking like an Ana or a Mercy in the situation I'm in. I
Yep.
did want to copy the Monkey, but he was in the bubble, so I went for the Diva instead, who was closer.
Okay. Yep. That's a good choice. Does now you're making me think, because I'm just having a brain fart here. Does bubble prevent a copy from happening?
Yes, it does. Any
Yes. All right.
shield prevents copy.
All right. Yep. So yeah, in that case, yeah, Diva is a decent pick, but the issue you get into is just the fact that she doesn't necessarily have the most like practical like ultimate to use. Like it's in comparison to another one like Monkey, for example, who you might get a little bit more value out of his just having his ultimate for additional survivability. Ashe is also pretty decent, as you just basically land one dynamite and then we have it. Sometimes Diva just isn't going to be. I probably say she's kind of a medium value pick in general, whereas Monkey's a pretty high value pick with your ultimate. It's pretty easy to stay alive with him. But yeah, Diva's not too bad.
Averting personality, Echo online. Focus my target. Double kill. I knew you could do it. 30 seconds. Going free. They must not get past.
Okay, so far stickies have been looking pretty solid.
I feel like positioning is another major thing I'm struggling with.
Yeah. Which we haven't seen a ton of like punishment for that so far. Now this one we just get one tapped in the head. Let's see how that happens. Okay. Their only thing I would say is just jumping. Typically, you want to make sure we're not spam jumping because when you are, then that's going to basically allow you to get headshot easier, especially the higher up in ranks you go. Because when you go up, you have to come down. Therefore, it's a predictable animation, and you can get headshots pretty easily out of it. The only time you probably should be jumping is like when you're right on top of somebody, or of course you need to jump to get up something. But other than that, you don't want to just use your jump randomly because then that's just going to get its headshot, like in this case. And then on top of that, just if you see Hanzo peeking, you might want to just back up and not give him visibility on you because he does have that one tap potential that we want to be very careful of.
The battle continues. Thanks for the second chance. Lifting off, burning them down. 10 seconds. وليهم It's quiet. Beam activated.
Alright, so rewatch this. We get a bunch of stickies on her, but then she just gets healed up. I think that was the big issue there.
Beam activated.
Yeah. Before that, when we went up on the Hanzo, I just want to rewatch this real quick. So we go up on the Hanzo, we just end up dropping a little bit too early. And then that just puts him out of our line of sight on him. We're also just kind of floating a little bit out in the open there, so we just want to be careful of, being out in the open because that's just kind of how positioning works. We, of course, haven't seen much punishment for that as of yet, but I have noticed that a little bit is that we're just slightly floating out in the open. And when you're out in the open, that's just going to mean that we don't have any cover we can use, and therefore it's going to get us killed. So we just want to watch out for that. But quite honestly, we haven't been seeing many mistakes yet. And you say you're just getting back into the game, yeah?
Yeah, not even a week.
Not even a week. Okay. So have you seen like in competitive how you started to see kind of a how do I say this, like a plateau yet, or you feel like you just keep climbing?
Definitely a plateau. I've had
Definitely a
a
plateau. Okay.
very. I haven't been winning barely at all.
Beam
Okay,
activated.
so there she just gets healed up and then she's good. Yeah, but so far we've been looking pretty solid. Nothing, probably say that's really apparent.
Learning from that one.
Besides, of course, the ultimate usage being one of the biggest things. Yeah, just backing up.
Finishing them off. Mobility increased. Where does it Heroes never die.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd probably say the one of the biggest things I'm noticing is just our passive nature and the fact that we aren't going in when we see other teammates going in. So in this instance, for example, when we have like our monkey who's getting aggressive and inside of them, and our tracer who's inside of monkey dives in, and then she drops, and then tracer dives in, and we're just kind of sitting here, and this has kind of been the kind of the main thing is that we just are kind of poking and poking and poking and poking and poking, and we don't seem to really hard engage very much. So we probably want to make sure that we are playing a little bit more aggressive. So kind of when it comes to your aggression, you kind of have a spectrum, right? Where on one end you have a 0, and that is passiveness, and then on one end you have 100, and that is aggressiveness. When right now I'd probably say we're just a little bit too passive most of the time. We're probably sitting around like a 35-ish roughly, right? And I'm not saying that you want to all of a sudden bring that up to an 80, because that would just be too aggressive all the time. But instead, I want you just to pull it up to a 50, making sure that we're being more aggressive, doing things more often, and then we'll see more value out of getting that. And then, of course, you play more aggressive when we have reasons to play aggressive, and we play more passive when we have reasons to play passive. At the moment when you see your team is getting aggressive and going in, this is where we should probably be getting a little bit more aggressive and starting to push forwards a little bit more. Whereas we kind of sit off to the side a little bit.
Enemy seen. Quite the boost. Fire at will.
I made a big issue up coming soon. I feel somewhere here. Who's
Yeah,
there?
okay. So right here, you see we just kind of step out in the open. So now we get into a little bit of what you're talking about with your positioning, right? So why don't we just talk about that real quick? So here we just kind of fly straight out the open, where we just go boop, and now we've gone into bad positioning currently. So why don't we just leave real quick to talk about that? So we're at 6 minutes. All right, just exit out here real quick. So when it comes to cover usage, right, and good positioning, right, good positioning is the usage of cover, whereas bad positioning is the absence of cover. If we are standing right here, right, there's a whole enemy team standing over there, and they're all shooting at us, it takes us, right, like 1, 2, 3 seconds to get behind cover, right, and from here we can, shoot people all we want, right, we can do whatever we want from here, but in that time it took us to walk here, we died, right, whereas if we're right here, we in half of a second we can go like this, and now they can no longer see us, right? It's just half of a second, right? So we have a lot more survivability when we're doing this, and the exact same concept applies when we're in the sky too. We want to be using sky cover, so instead of just floating up here, we would use something like this and use this pillar so that we can put people out of our line of sight when we're up in the sky, right? And we can use high grounds like this. We just want to make sure that we're not just floating straight through the open, because that's not going to be very good for you. Other types of cover is we can use slopes like so. We can use pillars and whatnot like this, right? When we're ducking, when we're reloading, when we're shooting at, in between shooting at people, right? When we're low HP, we have corners and we have random objects that we have like this, right? That we can use, pillar, corner, doorway, corner, and then all of high ground as well acts as natural cover. So we can use this like that, right? They can see us, now they can't. Now they can, now they can't. Or, sorry, opposite, right? Can, can't,
Yeah.
can, right? So we just want to make sure that we're using cover properly and not jumping out into the open, because that's going to be how we have survivability and we actually stay alive to do things.
Arriving at watch point, ready for battle.
I feel like I get too nervous, like knowing like if I go to aggro, I'm gonna throw, so I get scared, so I play more passive.
Yep.
I don't know when to go aggro.
Just, yeah, you have to remember that, we could play passive and then sit and spawn the entire game and never die once, but, we're also never going to accomplish anything and therefore lose the game. All right, so we just want to find that nice balance between when to play a passive, when to play aggressive, and we'll get more into, when you do which. But at the moment, just in general, playing slightly too passive, right? Because that just means that we're
Yeah.
not accomplishing anything. All right, we're at 5 minutes, it looks like. Like right past this. Alright, so here, for example, something we probably could have done was just, since our team is not currently engaged with them, we probably just could have walked around and then gone up here, which would now put us much closer to them and allow us to capitalize and do more damage better. And then, yeah, instead we just engage from really far away out in the open and then we die, right?
Learning from that one.
Okay, so we're coming up on another ult here.
Moving up. The payload has reached the chip. Changing position. Damage systems increased. Damage amplified. Burning them.
Very nice.
Flight routine activated.
Okay, so now our team's engaging. This should be around the time where we should be using our ultimate. Alright, but we don't, but this is fine because we end up starting to win the fight there. Okay, that fight we had some good aggression. So far mechanics are looking really solid, and ability usage are looking really solid. It's just kind of our ability to actually capitalize on them and use them.
Adjusting angle of attack.
Oh, so here, the issue that I'm seeing is that, like, this, I have no problem with this positioning. It's just the fact that we're not being sneaky or quiet about it at all. So we come over here to the side and nobody sees us at all, right? We could quite honestly don't add in a fly. We're like right here and we can just, walk around, just get up here on the high ground. We don't have footsteps as echo. We can just sit up top behind them. But instead what ends up happening is we end up flying to where now Lucio can see us and they can all see us, and then we actually peek the edge here to where they can see us. Now they all know we're here, right? And they fly up to us. Whereas, our whole team's not ready to engage yet, so we kind of just like peek early there when we probably could have gotten a surprise advantage, right? This kind of ruins our ability to just pop up from behind and get a pick real quick. So just not the best play to be is revealing ourselves so early. Again, notice our flying through the open, right? Just no cover anywhere. Whereas we probably didn't have a reason why we needed to back up from up here. Like we probably just could have kept it, even if we shouldn't have revealed our position. There's no problem with just staying here, because if we get low and we're about to die, then we have our copy to just keep ourselves alive. Keep in mind that when you have copy, you can afford to play a little bit more aggressive because you have it as a way to get it out. That's how we used it the first time we used it, right? We just used it as to get out a free card, but because we kind of left so early, our Mercy ended up dying, which we have to be careful about us and Echo, because we're kind of in charge of that. Notice how in the last fight we also got Mercy killed by flying out in the open. So when we have bad positioning and we have bad aggression, this also affects our Mercy and ends up getting her killed. So that means that our deaths and our even mistakes get punished 2 times as much, because for example, last fight, where we end up going and making a dumb decision by being out of position, that gets us down 2 people, which essentially just flat up loses the fight for us, right?
Winston.
Oh, kind of lost track of him there.
I seem to have lost my personality duplication complete. I like this. Double kill.
All right.
Up here. Damage increased. Your support has arrived. You should be at peak performance levels.
60 seconds remaining. Lifting off.
Okay, so here this is good because we're actually using cover properly. There we like we rewatch this. Looks like we got bubble over top of it. It looks as though we kind of like dropped from high ground even before we got the bubble down, like from the monkey. So just make sure we're paying attention to McCree, and he potentially could have killed us there. Reinhardt we probably could have helped kill, but he ended up dying anyways. Just nice mechanics, good aggression here.
Changing position. 30 seconds remaining.
Amplified. Your support has arrived.
Executing flight maneuvers. Damage systems increase.
Okay, this is where our team's getting aggressive. So yeah, why don't we just talk about some aggression, right? When our team is going in and creating space for us, we want to be getting aggressive in those instances. So for example, right here, when we see Monkey dive in, right about now, or right about now, right? Who are they all looking at? We like visit each person's perspective, and like they're all looking at Monkey.
Yeah.
Right. He's about to be looking at Monkey in a second here. I guess he's not. He's running away from Monkey. Right. Ryan's on Monkey. Mora's not on Monkey, but Diva's on Monkey. Right. Mercy's not on Monkey, but pretty much every single person on their team's on Monkey. So this is the perfect opportunity for us to engage. Yet when Monkey goes in, we're kind of sitting back a little bit. So like if we rewatch that when Monkey goes in, we're just kind of sitting there, right, for a little bit, and we have this hesitation where Monkey goes in, and we just kind of poking, and then we go in on the Hanzo, and then in that instance maybe both abilities weren't necessary. Making sure we're not kind of overlapping if unneeded. So here on the Hanzo, for example, or we see that he's being killed by so many people, we can just throw some stickies on him, and then we see he's purple, 1 HP, he's dead. So you just hold on to your beam. We want to make sure, because then we can use our beam for somebody else, because that just ends up being a wasted ability. All right, so just paying attention to that. And then still Monkey's in there, he's primaling, he has nano, he's drawing the attention of half their team, but we're still kind of sitting here poking and poking. All right, so this is just where we want to be upping our aggression, right? That's where we would be going from 50% up to like 60%, maybe 70%, right? Where we're just going in a little bit harder. We're going and doing things because we have that advantage. All right, so there, let's rewatch that real quick. So first off, we cancel our fly pretty early. I don't think that there's a reason to cancel our fly when we could just keep flying above him, right? We just kind of stop it. Like we just let go of it really early when we could just keep flying up in the air and just staying here, which is just give us really good visibility and be able to kill anything we want to. On top of that, we also have the option to go for a copy here, and it looks like we end up missing that. We kind of aren't we're not able to get around the corner in time. But the big thing the big issue that we get into here is that we're just out in the open. That when we were flying, look where we were flying right here, and that's just so far away from any cover anywhere. And then as a result, we die, and then that means that in a fight where we could be using nano, or not nano, sorry, our ultimate, right, we could be using our copy, right, we just aren't able to use copy because of the fact that we're just out in the open and we die, right? So positioning once again, feeding into death, and then therefore we don't get value. We're putting our team at down a player, and then also on top of that, being out of the fight for a whole 20 seconds while we're respawning and getting back to the fight, right? So making sure we're using cover, standing closer to walls and corners and doorways and objects so that we can, actually stay alive and not die all the time. Okay, so no reason not to copy, just, get some. Yeah, there you go. Hanzo's not the bestest, so honestly in that situation, like, just going for the diva probably would be a better idea right before she died. Alright.
3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming. I am moving the payload. Escort taking off.
Very good damage. Now this is where we can get a whole lot of spam damage in, and this is fine because we're doing a lot of damage into that corridor, into that little room. Now they're starting to back up. Our monkey's diving in. This is where we can, go top left, having impact. Yep, exactly what we're doing right there. Maybe a little bit more aggressive than what we did though. It's just kind of we do the, instead of what I was saying is like maybe we could go when our monkey's in on top of them, we can go up and like right up here, get a little bit closer. Why don't we talk about this real quick? Just your distancing. So we're at a little bit in second round. So with our positioning, so far we're standing a little far away from people. We're just constantly keeping a pretty far distance, and it's on Echo. You don't necessarily, like, you don't have any fall off, right? We can do the same amount of damage from here and on people than if we were like much closer to them. We can land stickies the exact same, but we do, as Echo, usually want to play a little bit closer for a couple different reasons, right? Again, excluding the fact that if you're on a spam composition, then you're fine to play at this distance. But in general, we want to be trying to, in the composition that we're on currently in game, we want to be getting a little bit closer to them, because from here, shots are just, quite frankly, going to be very difficult to land, right? From this distance, it's very hard to land shots when we don't have a scope, when we don't have a lowered sensitivity, and it's much easier to hit a shot on someone who's like right next to us, like these guys, than someone who's all the way over there. On top of that, you also have a little bit of a spread between your shots, so it's like, for example, if we're aiming for heads, like, it just, some of the shots just end up going past them, because it's a little bit spread out, so it makes it, kind of the triangle there makes it a little bit harder to hit shots as well at a range, whereas they're right next to you, that's different. On top of that, we can't use our beam. Our beam's a 15-meter. Oh, or did they lower it? I think it's 15
It's
meters, right?
15, yeah.
Yep. So we can't use it from past here. So that means that we probably want to be purposefully putting ourselves within this range so we can actually get value out of it. Whereas a lot of times in our matches, we're just kind of like eternally sitting at this distance where we're just never getting closer. We're just constantly at this kind of mid to long range. Just means that we're just constantly spamming, which is okay if you're on a spam comp, but it's not okay if you're not on a spam composition, right? Just to make sure you're familiar. I know you used to be, play the game a lot. Are you familiar with what a spam composition is?
Oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Just making sure, right? So let me press that. We're not currently on a spam comp in the game that we're in, therefore we probably don't want to just be poking the entire time.
Arriving at watch point.
Yeah, I never really thought about. I never considered the team and how I play around the team.
Yep.
'Cause the truth is, whenever I play ranked in these situations, I get very stressed and I panic and I don't think through very well.
Yep. So we just want to make sure we're trying to isolate that panic. I would imagine, I would imagine a lot of that panic comes from it just being unfamiliar territory, and that you're kind of getting back into it. Whereas, I might be just speculating here, and I might be completely wrong, but I would imagine when you're in your number one spot on Apex, you weren't panicking nearly as much, right?
Yeah, no, yeah.
So because you're used to it, you're good with it. You know how to plan. You know what's going on. So we want to just make sure we're trying to isolate the panic and get rid of it, and looking to think through our plays. And just in this instance, that kind of comes in at awareness. Is team composition dictates play style. It applies both ways. It's both our team composition and their team composition. When we're on different team comp, we're playing differently, and when they're on a different team comp, we're playing differently. So we want to make sure that's pretty much the first thing where we're paying attention to every single game, and that's what we were talking about earlier with like identifying who are the best targets to be copying as well. Is we want to make sure that we are paying attention to team comps because they do a lot. Now let's go over quick strengths and weaknesses and analyze what we need to work on so far. Ability usage. Honestly, looking pretty solid. I don't really have any problem with our stickies. I probably say the only thing with our beam is just sometimes we're out of range of it, and or a lot of times, sorry, we're out of range of it. And then on top of that, it seems as though we just sometimes end up wasting it, like on someone who might not need it. So make sure we're paying attention to health bars, and that comes in at awareness again, and not using it when it's not needed. And then on top of that, like beam oftentimes is going to be used to finish off like half of your kills pretty much, whereas I haven't seen it doing as much as it maybe should be. So we just want to make sure we're putting a little bit more effort into using our beam usage to get value. Flying, not that big of a deal, besides making sure we're not the positioning part of it not being on the open, and then also not canceling it randomly. And then overall ability usage is looking like pretty low in the chart. Probably say like low to medium priority for you to work on. Ultimate usage, we've seen two of them. Or was it two or three? There's
Two, I think it was
two.
the
Yeah.
Chief and Hanzo.
So ultimate usage, we talked a bunch about ultimate usage stuff, and it's looking like it does need a little bit more work than some other things. So for now, ultimate usage, we might see more of them, but for now, that's going at like kind of a medium high. General mechanics, just you shooting at stuff, pretty much no issue. You have very good mechanics. And you don't have an issue with just hitting your stickies or hitting your with your tracking with your beam, or you're just hitting your shots. You seem to be doing all that fine. Um, Besides that, I think the only thing I would say with mechanics is just kind of actions per minute, which we haven't talked about, but just to get into it real quickly, it's just sometimes we take random breaks, and that kind of feeds into our aggression. Is that we just want to make sure we're constantly doing things. So, like if you can, for example, compare a bronze player to a grandmaster player, a grandmaster player is going to be efficient with pretty much every single second of the game. They're going to be trying to do something constantly, and they're not going to be taking random breaks. Whereas a bronze player might be going pew pew pew, shoot shoot shoot, and then they might just pause for a couple seconds, and then they might go pew pew pew, shoot shoot shoot, and then they're gonna look, oh yeah, look at those pretty birdies, and they're like, oh snap, we're in a fight, right? And they'll get back to it. So we just want to make sure that we're of course we're not to that extreme extent, but there are some times where we just stop doing things when we probably should be doing things. So we want to make sure we're just doing that. But for the most part, mechanics is looking like a low priority. We're looking really good on that. Positioning, looking a little bit higher. We've talked about a bunch of positioning stuff. Using cover, especially, is one of the big ones. Staying within range of of our kit, so we can be doing a bit more, especially when we're on the current composition that we're on, like a dive. That probably is going to be put up at like a medium high as well, because that's also feeding into us dying a lot. And then finally, you have awareness. Awareness, I think we've talked a decent amount of. And then that really feeds into aggression as well. Awareness feeds into our aggression, so we'll just kind of combo those together. So I would say we want to make sure that we're paying attention to what were some of the things? Paying attention to kill feed, or not kill feed, sorry, tab, and seeing like, what team compositions we're running, paying attention to who, like, how the fight's going, so we can know when to be aggressive and when not to be aggressive, right? And then because of all the things we've talked about, it's a lot of bits and pieces here and there that we've discussed, which adds up a little bit, especially on the aggression end, is probably coming out at like a medium or medium high. So just you know couple things at the top, couple things at the bottom, and then we'll just adjust them as we go here.
Yeah.
So yeah, so here, we go in, and I would probably say that we'd be better off like going in like and being like right here, because then as soon as monkey bubble breaks and monkey backs down, then we can just drop off the like to down here or drop off the high ground, and then we just wait for our our flight to come back, right? But instead we kind of do this wide peak, which puts us really far away from any cover usage. Like look at how the the difference between over here and over here is. The bubble breaks and there's no cover anywhere, whereas over here we have the boxes, we have the the wall that we can duck underneath, but this is much more out in the open. It's also outside of our beam range, and we also back up backwards, which just puts us pretty far back. All right, so a lot of just passive playing. Okay, getting headshot, being out in the open, right? They just being out in the open's gotten us killed quite a bit. And why don't we just talk about survivability a little bit, right? Just because I think the main one that's feeding into our survivability is our positioning. I don't think that there's too much else. Like the four main things that can cause deaths most of the time are going to be misuse of abilities, a lack of awareness, a misuse of aggression, and then positioning. Most of the time, it's been I don't think we haven't had anything that's been around awareness, but we've had a lot of positional deaths, a couple aggression deaths, and then a couple just I guess you can kind of pair in flight, like flying up out into the open, kind of in with those is just make sure we're not flying straight up in out in the open where there's no cover at all, right? Because that's what we just did there, and then therefore we died. Deaths obviously something we don't want to do, right? In Apex, they're a little bit more severe because you die, and unless you get res, you're out of the game for good, right? But in this case, you do get respawn, but deaths are still really important, and we want to make sure we're not dying, because when we die, we are putting our team at a disadvantage to where now they are more likely to lose the fight without us. We also lose our carry potential and our impact, and we're also going to be outside of the fight for 20 seconds, right? It's 10 seconds to respawn, 10 seconds to walk back, which means roughly 20 seconds of death. So far, we've had, I don't know, we've had quite a bit of deaths. We've had, I don't know if I can remember enough to put a number on it, but let's just, it's a 20-minute game. That's a pretty long game. Let's just throw a random number out there and say we had like 12 deaths, which would probably be like a little, a pretty bad death rate to have. Let's just say we have 12 deaths here, because that's looking like at the rate at which we're heading towards with a 20-minute game so far. That means it's 20 seconds of death, right? Just do a quick little math here real quick and then divide by 60, which means that we're essentially outside of the game, not doing anything at all for an entire 4 minutes of gameplay, right? Which is a ridiculous number to think about, because that's 4 minutes of gameplay is time that you could be getting like 3 ultimates and getting a ton of kills and doing a ton of damage, and not putting your team at a disadvantage. In fact, probably putting them at neutral or an advantage, right? So we just want to make sure we're staying alive to actually do things and impact things, whereas we're dying quite a bit, which is just meaning that we aren't able to do as much.
Let's get you home.
Though getting rest does help.
Damage boost engaged.
Moving up. Locking on.
Okay, good job paying attention there. His health bar, like the beam there. I don't think I even noticed that he was low.
Damage systems increased.
Okay, we see the Zarya pushes in, so that's good.
Mobility increased. Double kill.
Okay, a lot of this just like poking from a distance again.
We're making progress. The payload has reached the
No one can hide from my sight.
finishing them off. Double kill. Adjusting angle of attack.
Okay, very nice. Looking for our ult here probably.
I'm taking care of you.
Probably want to be setting. Okay, this current positioning is not the best. Currently we should probably be sitting up here on the high ground. In general, I don't think we've had a problem with this in the and like so far, but just remember that high ground positioning is very good positioning. Right, all of high ground acts as natural cover, like we discussed before. On top of that, characters in the game can't get up to us. Everyone on their team besides Monkey cannot reach us up there on the high ground very fast, which means that it takes them much more time to get to us. And then on top of that, it gives us tons of visibility where we can pretty much drop like anywhere on this entire point from this high ground and just be able to see anyone from up here. Whereas this bottom right angle is a pretty poor angle to have, like where it's just like pretty bad positioning. It puts our Mercy at like 1 HP and possibly gets her killed there. Oh, does get her killed there, right? So again, remembering like probably don't want to be on the open where it's going to get her killed. There in that positioning that we did have, it was just what are we going to do from here? The fight, like, our whole team is all the way back here. So, the fight's not going to be happening yet. We're going to get in like one right click and then, we have to back up anyways, right? It's not going to do anything. We're not going to be able to do anything from that position. Whereas from this high ground, we can just do a whole lot more with a whole lot of more survivability. So we just want to make sure that we're repositioning to the best place possible in between fights, but we're not, sitting on the floor over on the right side here, which isn't going to do anything for us. Instead, we're repositioning up to the high ground, which is going to be much better for us. And then that might keep our Mercy alive here and not let her die. Probably should be looking for our ultimate right about now. Notice again how like Monkey's getting aggressive. He's doing stuff, yet we're kind of playing real passive back on cart here.
Adaptive circuits engaged. McCree.
Okay.
It's high noon.
There, we probably could have just kept high nooning the Monkey. I don't know. There wasn't anything else on our like in our line of sight that we could have gone for. Like currently, Ana just ducks around that corner. So like, what are we planning on high nooning here, right? So probably we should just keep going for the Monkey, but he just drops and gets out of line of sight. So we probably could have kept going for him pretty easily because he's right here still. And we could have even even dropped on this side too, or like we could have even just moved over to this side too and been able to still see him. But instead we kind of aim for the Ana, which doesn't do anything for us, and then we waste a large portion of our ultimate. Oh, a lot of our aim going everywhere there. Okay, you can see a little bit of the actions per minute like we were talking about with his... Oh, snap. Skip that far back. With this rotation up to the high ground, where like we fly up to the high ground, we see Ana, we see Ana's up there, and then she backs up, and then we go for the Monkey, and then we kind of do this little wrap around and we sit here and there's nothing there. So we just kind of, did an unnecessary like 3-second rotation, which, is just happening semi-frequently. It's not happening all the time, and it's not, for full 5 seconds, 10 seconds, but it's just like, there's that little bit of inefficiency where like we just kind of wrap around to the left unnecessarily, whereas we could have just like dropped straight on top of McCree or Hanzo, which would be a lot more efficient, and also be, we'd get a lot more of a surprise advantage rather than coming from the side. It would also put us more in range of them if we're not approaching from that far away.
Mobility increased. Someone get that payload moving. Going free. Burning them down.
Feeling powerful.
Flight routine activated. Beam activated.
Enemies detected.
Make sure when we're low HP that we're... Okay, so in this instance, actually, I think we're last one alive. Okay, so Monkey alive. Okay, so that's it. We're out. Never mind.
I feel like I did nothing there. I don't know what I could have done better in the fight there.
Yeah, so in this fight, we, first off, we come in initially. We can just rewatch a little bit of this because I did have a couple things I just kind of let up on. So, first off, we go for the beam on the Zarya when she's jumping off the edge. So in this instance, we should, be paying attention to the fact that we're not going to be able to finish this beam on her because she's just going to instantly be around like off the edge, which happens. So we want to make sure we're not beaming there when she's just going to be around the corner anyways. On top of that, we kind of don't shoot. We kind of weren't even looking at the Mercy there until we were reloading, but we weren't really looking over to her to even like line up a shot. Then here on the McCree, there's no issue there, but in a moment here, we're going to jump up and right click, and we kind of we miss all the right clicks, and we go for a beam when he's not low. So in this instance, we just wanted to again kind of be aware of the fact that we missed those right clicks because they're still sitting on the ground over there, which means that we're not able to beam him down there at all. So we just a couple mess ups with our abilities, and then besides that, the fight was already lost by that point, where we just lost too many players.
Focus with me.
Probably retake the high ground now, right? Just take that high ground positioning. Yep, here we go. Okay, again, poking a lot from the front line. So why don't we talk a little bit more as well on some target priority? Again, it's not like a super massive thing, but it's just a tiny little thing. And when we have a bunch of these tiny things adding up, it really affects our gameplay. So target priority, we're just spending a bunch of time sometimes just on the tanks on the front line, which isn't going to be very effective for us. We're just kind of like, every single fight we just come straight up from this front line, really far away, which means that we just end up shooting at tanks a lot of the time, and tanks aren't what we want to shoot at. Tanks have 2 to 3 times the health of other characters. They have shielding and tanking abilities. They, on top of that, their role is to create space for other characters, whereas supports do the healing and DPS do the damage. So they output the statistical value, and they're the ones that we want to be killing. And therefore, how we avoid just always shooting at the tanks is we just come up and go for the support. So we'd go on what you call off angles or flanks. Flanks you don't want to go on in the middle of fights because flanks are inherently long and or dangerous, whereas off angles are just kind of a short little angle in which we can go through. So for example, like an off angle, let's try to find one real quick. Snap. All of high ground acts as an off angle. So like from the high ground, we can get around shields if they have a shield just from being above them. So as long as high ground is above them, it acts as an off angle. And for example, like right here, we could just fly right up top here, hover over, and then now boom, we're just right on top of McCree and Ana, where we can just get an easy pick on these squishy targets versus just shooting down main from a mile away at the Zarya and Monkey and giving Zarya energy. So it's just not super effective. We come up here to the right, it's still just kind of we shooting at Monkey pretty far away from them. Probably want to look for ult right about now.
Lock on my target.
Okay, beaming from too far away when nobody was low. Make sure beams a finisher. It doesn't get any value when it's not finishing. So we just want to make sure paying attention to health bars of people. Beaming from too far away again. We want to get used to that beam. It's 15 meters, right? Paying attention to the range at which we're in. That was a good copy. I like that we acquire the McCree there. That was really good. Yeah, just getting our ult real quick. We're just looking for people. Okay, so we're not too aware where people are at. Okay, so the big problem there was just that we just lost where everyone was at. So we want to make sure we're paying attention to, the location of people, which comes in again in awareness. So here we see that that Ana was top left previously. We see that Zarya was bottom left. We jump at the McCree. We know that Hanzo's to our right side. We honestly, from here, could have just kept walking at Hanzo. There's no reason to swap over to the Monkey when Hanzo's pretty close to us. And then, where are we at? We're right here. And then we get the Monkey, and then we just don't notice, don't see where anybody else is at. We kind of get lost a little bit. We hear them, and then we just react again a little bit slowly. So we just want to make sure we're paying attention to where people are at, and then that's it there. Nice shots. Yeah, the biggest ability I feel like we keep misusing is just our beam. It's such a good finisher because it just instantly melts anyone who is below half HP, but we constantly use it when it's too far away, or when people are not half HP, or we'll use it when they're just able to run, like get around the corner really fast, right? So it's just we constantly end up missing that one. Sticky bomb, we honestly, it's just really spammy ability that you use a lot of the time, where you're just using it off a cooldown every second you get just for extra damage out there, which we have been doing pretty well in fight. The only thing is just being on the open, but the beam is the big one that we just see being misused a lot here, or at least messed up, not necessarily misused.
Protect the payload. Fire at will.
Fly above him. Oh, never. Sorry, we don't have fly there. My bad.
Fire at will. I am on fire.
Alright, so they're on a Widowmaker now. Here we could probably be taking... Oh, we want to pay attention to team compositions. Oh, okay. So, paying attention to team compositions, right? That means that it's a really good habit to get into, to press tab in between every single fight, because we want to pay attention to when they swap characters and when we swap characters, because as we've discussed so far, team comp dictates playstyle. When we're at this range, we don't need to be too wary about flying up in the air, especially when we have cover this side and cover this side, but we do have to be careful when it's up against a Widowmaker, right? Which it really affects our gameplay, and therefore we need to know that they're on a Widowmaker, which comes from pressing tab and paying attention to it. So there we die because we're out of position, and we don't know that they swapped to Widowmaker, and we're just flying out in the open, which has been how we die a lot of the time here, just flying out in the open.
Thanks for the second chance. Quite the boost. Locking on.
Uh-oh, just those stickies just went right over his head. I like that we went for the Hanzo there, though again, part of paying attention to team compositions is paying attention to the fact that they have a mercy. When we get a kill and they have a mercy, a lot of the times we can't just leave the body, especially like if it's a pretty easy res location. Instead, we need to kind of camp it a little bit, make it, if mercy comes in for the res, then we can kill her. We can even, if we, for example, have a fly still, what we can do is bait the mercy res, so we can, back up a little bit, wait till mercy goes in, and then boom, we just fly back up to the top, shoot her in the head a couple times, and then boom, that's an easy kill, right? We just want to make sure we're paying attention to the fact that they have a mercy in the first place, so that we can actually punish the res. Let's see how we use our ultimate here in a moment. Nice copy. Honestly, I think our copy targets have been looking pretty solid, and I don't think that we're holding on towards our ultimates as much as I think we were led on to believe at the very beginning. So I think we're lowering that one's category a little bit. Ultimates have been looking pretty solid. We just want to make sure we're consistently doing all the things we talked about at the very beginning. Let's rewatch that a little bit. It looks like we just lost all of our teammates here. Yeah, they got grabbed and they're all dead. So in this instance, when did they get grabbed, before or after we ult?
I think it was as soon as I ult before. Yeah.
It was slightly beforehand.
Very close.
So in this instance, we can honestly, I don't think you have two. That's a hard one. Honestly, I think, there's not too big of a problem with us ulting there. It's just the fact that two of them got shredded like the second that we ulted. And then yeah, by that point the fight's lost. Alright, so why don't we leave here real quick. I'm going to go back to the main menu. So now we are going to go over all the main points of the session, and then do a review and then wrap up the session from there. So we're on Echo here, so point number one, let's think real quick. What was the biggest thing? So, I'd probably say positioning and survivability was the biggest thing. Probably closely followed by the awareness and aggression. We'll talk about that in a moment. But positioning and survivability, we just died a lot, and we were out in the open a lot, and just in positioning, making sure that we're using cover properly, both when we're on the ground and when we're in the air. Make sure instead of just flying up here out in the open, that we're, using cover in the sky, stuff like this, stuff like that, right? Pillars, using buildings and using high grounds, right? Make sure we're using cover properly. On top of that, make sure that we're not, just unless we're on a spam composition. That's the unless part here. We don't want to just be constantly spamming from this distance. We want to be a little bit closer because it's going to be very inaccurate from that distance. You're not going to be able to use your beam. And also, I believe copy is also out of range from that distance as well. So that's going to not allow you to use copy. And then most characters that you're copying, you're going to need to be closer anyways to actually utilize them. So from back here, I believe like you're yeah, like you can see you're out of range of copy from back here until we get closer. Now we can. So we just want to make sure that we're being a little bit closer. On top of that, don't constantly approach from the frontal angle, right? When we're just constantly coming from the front line, we're not going to be able to, we're just going to be shooting at tanks a lot, right? And we're not going to be able to shoot at the things we want to shoot at, the DPS and the supports. Instead, we take what you call off angles. So, this is the main, or this is the main angle. The enemy team's right there. We're right here. Main angle. Off angle would be like if we just came in here real quick. Got past the tanks, got past the shields. Quick right click, shoot in the back line. Now we're out, right? Took very fast, very safe. Okay, again, enemy team there, our team here, main angle, right? Off angle would just be if like we went up to the high ground real quick. Now this is getting us around shields, around tanks, straight to the back line, gets us on the things we want to shoot at, right? We also want to make sure that we are taking high grounds and we are also rotating to the best place possible in between fights. So that we can have, good positioning and may have a ton of time to rotate in between fights. And then finally, just survivability, wanting to make sure that we're staying alive and not dying all the time, and that's going to give us a lot more value. Pay attention to why you're dying. The biggest ones were, positioning, aggression, and then a little bit of awareness and a little bit of ability usage kind of feeding into that. Or honestly, I guess it's like a little bit of everything because your ability usage. Most of the time we died was because we would just kind of do this and fly straight up out in the open, or we just fly straight up in the air, right, and then that would just get us killed. Okay, number 2 main point is awareness. Awareness. Want to make sure we're paying attention to when can we be getting aggressive, when should we be playing passive. When you have an advantage, and when you have your team going in and creating space for you, that's when we get aggressive. When we have disadvantages and when our team's not going in, that's when we might want to play a little more passive. In general, you want to be sticking around 50% aggression all the time, or like on average. And then right now we're just a little bit too low at like a 35. We want to bring it up a little bit, and then you're going to be getting more aggressive or more passive according to the situation. Pay attention to where is my team, where is the enemy team, so that we can, again, that's going to feed into aggression, and it's going to let us know, who to go on. Like in the last fight where we just didn't know where half their team was, right? We just want to pay attention to where they're positioned, right? Then I think that is pretty much, and also paying attention to team compositions. We talked a lot about that. Just pay attention to what they're running, because that affects our gameplay a lot. Right, press tab in between, pretty much every single fight. Right, be a good habit to get into. Number 3, we're going to put at, honestly, I'm going to put at your ability usage over your ultimate usage. Ability usage, just the biggest thing is just our beam usage, and then once in a while we'd mess up some stickies, once in a while we'd mess up some, or I guess not once in a while. Our fly also, we mess up a lot. The big one is just, we just do this and fly up out in the open, and sometimes we'd cancel it. Stickies, making sure we're, paying attention when they actually land. And then finally your beam usage, make sure we're within range of it, because we'd kind of use it a lot outside of range. And then also pay attention to when people are, about to go around the corner. Like if this guy's about to run around the corner, like it's useless to beam right there, right? Because he's just around the corner. Pay attention to our health bars. That's another part of awareness that I forgot to mention. Just pay attention to health bars so you know when you can use your beam. And I just, in general, want to see us getting a lot more value out of it, because it's a pretty powerful ability that I don't feel like we're utilizing too well. Now, number 4 is our ultimate usage, which our ultimate usage we talked a little bit about. We honestly seem to be doing pretty decent with it in the game that we were in. There's just a couple things, like just don't hold on to it. Make sure that we are using it at the very start of fights. We're not using it, after they've used their ults. We want to use our ults first. Make sure we're thinking about what things to copy and trying to copy the best things, and then just, get a little bit we can get a little bit more aggressive when we have it available. But, we didn't mess up all the time. We just messed up a tiny little bit of the time with it. And then finally, the last thing being our mechanics. General mechanics of just shooting at stuff pretty perfect, with a couple mess ups, and then the other 2 things would just be making sure we're not shooting at tanks all the time, which is target priority, and then after that, just making sure our actions per minute is up a little bit. We're not just sitting around doing nothing sometimes, or we just play a little bit too passive. But that also kind of goes into aggression, right? And then that is pretty much it. So do you have any questions on anything we've talked about?
Yeah, I do have one because I do really want to climb on DPS because I've hit GM top 500 on tank support before, but I get afraid of losing. So I'm in such a low elo on DPS because I'm in mid diamond. I wonder if you had any like advice on how to get over that mentality of not wanting to lose and constantly losing, or how to consistently climb.
Okay. Want to make your goal on when you're playing your basically your mindset and your intentionality should not be on winning, right? If your mindset and your intentionality is on winning, you're actually in the long run not going to be improving and getting better or winning games, right? So when your mindset is on improvement and getting better, then you're actually going to first off be eliminating a lot of the stress because you're not just focused on winning, winning, winning. But then on top of that, you're actually going to be winning more in the long run because you're improving your gameplay, which will mean that now you're a better player. So currently, you could be a GM in on tank and support, but you're not a GM player on DPS. So if we're trying to get up to that level, we need to improve upon our gameplay. And if we're just focused on winning, that's not how we're gonna do it. On top of that, just make sure we're focusing on just breathing whenever you catch yourself. Not like kind of being stressed out, make sure kind of pulling yourself out of it, do like a quick take a quick break if you need to, if you're feeling stressed after games, and then try to intentionally put focus into being calm while you're playing so that you can make better decisions and focus on things. And then like I said, one of the things when it comes to just focusing on improving, one of the side effects of focusing on improving on some of these things that we talked about is that you just feel less stressed because now you're not your focus isn't on the thing that's causing the stress, which is a lot of the time the thing that's causing stress is because we're just stressed about losing SR, right? If we're not concerned about the SR, but we're because we're just trying to get better, then now that means that we're not as stressed, right? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So yeah, it's a lot about like I can't change your mentality for you. It's a lot about changing your own mentality and making sure we're paying attention to it and putting effort into changing our mentality. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Then yep. Any other questions?
No, I think that's it. You've definitely helped me get a few more notes and a better understanding of what I can do to hopefully get better at the character and the role, really.
All right. Sounds good, man.